So hi, I'm here with my friend Brian Cohen, who is a super broker, super power, super lawyer in New York, and they're on the real estate scene, and I'm thrilled to have him here. Brian, how'd you get from wherever you grew up to uh, Goulston and Storrs as the one of the managing partners, and definitely a super lawyer?
Well, I grew up in New Jersey, and I think it was the Holland Tunnel, or maybe it was the Lincoln Tunnel. So it's not the longest story, which is great because I haven't been to that many law firms in my career, but I could sort of jump ahead a bit. I went to George Washington University and focused primarily.
What was the hook to go there?
Oh, I always was really interested in political science, history, international affairs, and still am, and love reading sort of biographies about diplomats, whether it be Kissinger or other amazing people who've accomplished things, and sort of history, studying lessons of the Cold War, lessons of governments that have come and gone. And so I had this amazing opportunity to go to GW and got a degree in political science and worked on Capitol Hill. At that time, I also did a lot of, volunteering on campus, particularly for UJA, United Jewish Appeal. At the time, it was really interesting. It was the Jewish community in the United States was tremendously involved in rescuing the Jewish community of the former Soviet Union. There was this opening in the early 90s for 1.5 million or more of people who were considered refuseniks, who weren't allowed to leave. They could all of a sudden have this amazing opportunity to immigrate to the United States and also to Israel. And so I got involved on campus in this movement, and in particularly to work on behalf of sort of fundraising and also getting students to get energized and involved. And what happened is that I was studying political science and international affairs, and I was involved in this whole process, and it was really interesting. So instead of going right to law school, because I always thought it would be really interesting to sort of play the role of an advisor and be a lawyer. I didn't exactly know what that meant. I'm the first lawyer in my family. But I thought that this could be a really interesting thing to do in the future. But I took a sort of a quick turn, and I took about 18 months and went to go work for, at the time it was called United Jewish Appeal National, but it's now called the I think JFNA, which is the sort of Jewish Federations of America, primarily going up and down the West Coast to college campuses, standing in front of audiences and getting people sort of to learn and get excited about this concept called Operation Exodus, which is to basically bring these people to freedom. And I thought that was amazing. And I got a free trip to Israel, which was my first trip to Israel in 1992, I think it was, or 1993. And but I always intended to go to law school. And Cardozo Law School here in New York City, which is connected to Yeshiva University, has this amazing program where if you apply, if you apply sort of in the middle of the year, you could start in an accelerated class in January, which sounded pretty cool to me because you could do law school in 2.5 years. And that was great because that's one less semester where I'm not earning money to pay for my rent and food and beer budget or whatever it was. So it made a lot of sense to me. And I, at the time, was on the West Coast. I relocated myself to the East Coast, enrolled in law school, and got through law school and did quite well for the first, it was 2.5 years. And as soon as I was done, there were no jobs anywhere. In
What year?
1996. There weren't any jobs for lawyers. However, things were starting to thaw a little bit. So I ended up with 2 job offers notwithstanding. One job offer was to be to be the general counsel of H&H Bagel. So that sounded a little crazy to me. I would have no mentor. I'd learn nothing, but I would work for a bagel company, which sounded kind of exciting for like the first couple of minutes. If I wanted to get paid significantly less, I took a job to be the only associate at a land use boutique working for an amazing land use lawyer named Sheldon Lobel. and a lot of people have
the
gone
legend,
through
the legend.
the legend of Sheldon Lobel. And I worked for Sheldon, and my job was literally to learn on the job. So every day I would wake up and I'd be either at the Board of Standards and Appeals or the Landmarks Commission or the tax office on Sutphin Boulevard in Queens. And I was learning and doing, and I was also meeting some of the most amazing real estate people who were at the early parts of their careers, including the two first clients that I worked on behalf of were Jeff Levine of Levine Builders,
Wow.
and also Ken Horn of Alchemy Properties. And those were the first two sort of amazing real estate
Great
thinkers
guys,
that I got to meet in the
Both
beginning of my career.
Great, yeah.
So what happened there was that I was learning, but I needed to have a bigger platform, and also I was looking to figure out how to pay my law school loans. So about 9 months into this job, I realized that there was a shift in the market, and all of a sudden, in 1997, the world started to come back, but none of the large law firms had been training their summer associates and putting them into the real estate departments. So there was a real need for someone who at least knew what a deed was, what a transfer tax form was, and had some understanding. And I went out into the marketplace, and I ended up with 4 job offers at 4 large New York City law firms. Greenberg Traurig was the one firm that felt right to me, specifically because it had a growing land use practice, so I sort of would know what was happening the day I hit the ground, and it had this sort of beginning of this incredible practice led by Robert Ivanhoe, who's one of my friends and mentors, and now. And so I ended up going to Greenberg. And
Can I stop you?
Of course.
I met with him and his crew last week,
Mm-hmm.
and getting ready for the meeting, I looked at the bios of his team.
Mm-hmm.
It's the average tenure's like 30 years. So my question is, how could you have ever left, and why wouldn't you go back now?
Exactly. So, well, I'll tell you a nice note. Currently, I have maybe 4 or 5 deals in my practice, and Greenberg Traurig is on the other side of those deals.
on all of them. Oh,
Yeah.
all 4 or 5.
Well, I mean, I have
I didn't mean that.
about
You just
50
said
deals
4 or
happening
5.
right now.
Sorry.
But 4 or 5 of them, particularly,
They're in your life.
Yeah, they're in my. You and I did a deal in Greenberg, particularly our friend Ken Sklar was on the other side of that, and he's just such a gentleman. And also, there's alumni, like you have Massey Knackle alumni. There's alumni from my Greenberg Traurig days, and I was just on the phone with Neil Miller, who's at Katsky Korins, and he and I were having a conversation yesterday. So it really is incredible, the same way there's a diaspora that you and Bob created of so many amazing professionals. I have such a wonderful sort of alumni network, and also, I can't really call them alumni, folks that are still there. And I think that, among other things, it helps you start, and I learned this from one of the lawyers there, Barry Shimkin. He said, when you want to get a deal done, start on the 5th draft. Tell opposing counsel, don't send me the first draft. I think we all know how we're going to get to the 5th draft.
I love
Send me the
your
5th draft.
pre-negotiated concept. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, so you asked the question. So I had really an honor to be trained there for 11 years. I became a partner, I think, after 8 or 9 years. And as we it was like 2007, we started to ramp, things started to get busy toward the end of 2007. And then as we entered to 2008, it was sort of the beginning signs of the great financial crisis.
Everybody knew it was happening too. I remember that.
So I think we had over 80 real estate lawyers at Greenberg at the time. And I, along with maybe 2 or 3 others, were the youngest partners in the group. And I had a burgeoning sort of beginnings of a practice, but nothing really substantive. A few clients that were keeping me busy after I would finish the work of the firm. So I'd finish the work of the firm at 11 o'clock at night, and from 11 till 1 a.m., I'd do the work for these few clients that I was, conceptually. I'm sure I fit some stuff in the morning, too. So it got to the point where I realized that things were, and I think we all realized that things were looking pretty harsh out there. And then Rob Ivanhoe took me aside and said, you haven't been through a downturn. You haven't been through a cycle. Neither has, and he named a few of my colleagues. He said, there's an opportunity for you to step into a role as a general counsel for a multi-generational family where there's a father and a son, and you happen to have a particular aptitude for working with families. Part of it is you approach things in a very calm manner. And the other is that you're very thoughtful when it comes to sort of navigating complications. And the third thing is you know how to buy and sell an office building and assemble a development site. Because I had grown up at Greenberg for 11 years, primarily working for two of their clients. One was Glenwood, Leonard Litwin, doing assemblages all over New York City to build towers. And the other was SL Green, and helping them basically buy and then sell their B buildings and acquire, develop, finance, and joint venture what is now their A building portfolio. And I have a deal toy, which is basically a Greenopoly as opposed to Monopoly. A friend of mine from SL Green had given it to me. And around the perimeter of the board are all the buildings that I had worked on in the first 11 years of my career. So the idea is that I could go insert myself into this family, which I ended up doing, and I spent almost 2 years helping them navigate the great financial crisis, which was really exciting, because on one hand, when you're working with a large platform that has legacy assets, you're navigating the distress on the legacy assets. But on the other hand, you could actually help them look at the market and take advantage of the opportunities. And that's sort of the longer answer to how I ended up here through New Jersey, and I don't remember if it was the Lincoln Tunnel or the Holland Tunnel.
One of the conversations I was dying to have with you today is what were the characteristics of the great ones? And that could be brokers, lawyers, clients, developers. Tell me about Lenny Litwin. How everyone loved him. He was a prolific builder and developer. What made him different?
I think there was a lot of things that I learned, and keep in mind my perspective was as maybe 3 years out of law school, which actually is pretty interesting because cool. I had no preconceptions of what a real estate titan should be and look like, other than maybe a little bit that I read in the paper. I mean, when I was in law school, I thought I was going to be a litigator, but my first job was as a zoning lawyer, and here I am today hanging out with you. So, I mean, I didn't really know, I didn't have a background in real estate. So I remember this one opportunity where I was asked to help assemble the site that's now, I think they call it maybe 1 Barclay Street, which is a beautiful tower overlooking now what's the sort of Calatrava Trade Center area. And we were buying the primary site, and I was told in advance, go to the meeting, Mr. Litwin's not going to the meeting, propose the following changes and commit to the following, and just make sure you lock up the deal and then walk out of there. And I said, okay, I'll go in, I'll propose the changes, I'll negotiate what we needed to negotiate, and then I'll put together a document for Mr. Litwin to sign. And I was told, no, they'll just agree. You just say Mr. Litwin said it's okay and that he agrees to it, and you don't need any documents. And I said, how is that possible? And I walk into the room, and I did exactly the sort of plan. And I remember I remember exactly the conversation. And I said, listen, Mr. Litwin would like to make this last change, and he commits to do X. I don't really remember what X was. And the parties in the room, including the broker, I think it was Eric Anton at the time, when he was sort of early on in his career, said, okay, we're done. And what I learned there is that Mr. Litwin particularly, and there's a few others in our community, that when they say something, their word is gold. And the most important thing that you have in life, we tell our kids this, is your reputation, and you have to guard it with your life. And it was just an amazing moment to see how that works in practice, because he had that kind of reputation, that what he said and what he committed to, he always followed through, and he was so consistent, it made representing someone like him and working on behalf of Glenwood such an incredible opportunity for someone like a young lawyer at the time like me.
Awesome. I had a fun experience with Harry Macklow assembling the southeast corner of 53rd and 2nd, and he exhibited one of the other traits, which is insane patience. So there was a hardware store owner 3 buildings into the assemblage, owned by a guy named Howard Gasnick. And Howard and his brother owned this hardware store that was really cool. People don't know it, but there are streams and rivers underneath a lot of buildings in Manhattan. And there was a stream underneath this 2nd Avenue building, and Howard would take me downstairs to the basement, and we would fish in a hole that led to the stream. And at one point, Harry just kept telling me, go back and see Howard again. And I did, time and time again. And Howard would always blame his brother. He would, and he clearly didn't want to sell. But he would say the brother who had retired wouldn't sell. We'd have to go meet with him at some point, but I kept meeting with Howard. At one point, I got to 145 visits, and Harry said, go back again. And I mean, this was over a period of a couple of years. And I kept going and going, and finally Howard broke down, and we were able to secure the property. But Macklow's patience is legendary. His creativity and patience was legendary. But that's one of the superpower traits.
So I recently, I'll call it recently, there's now a building rising on the corner of 39th and 2nd that my dear friend and yours, David Brous, and his entire family have been working together to build what's now approximately like 160-unit beautiful building that's going to be called the Lotus. And it's going to be some version of LEED certified. It's going to actually be one of the first, we'll call it vegan buildings in New York. There won't be any animal products used, which if you think about it, it's a little bit like, where did that come from? But what happens is that when you start to put in sort of, the decorative elements, particularly furniture and other things into the lobbies and into the different amenities, there's just no leathers and things like that. So it's going to be a fascinating building. That building consists of 5 separate lots that were accumulated over 80 or 86 years by the three generations.
3 Brous generations.
3 Brous generations. And it was really I remember very clearly the groundbreaking day, and David gave the story. Not only was it 3 Brous generations over that period of time to assemble these 5 sites, Bank of America was the lender on that, and they had been the lender and the banker to the family for 100 years. And I think that and your example of the 140 some odd visits, 145 visits, is an excellent example of the patience that one needs to have in order to get through this process, whether it's generational patience or individual patience, particularly when it comes to, I think, and this is one of my favorite parts of the business, is land assemblage. When you're trying to put together the puzzle of a land assemblage, you have to take your time and really understand what is it that the other party not only is thinking, but what are their challenges and what are their needs. And it takes a lot of time. And I think that's some of the greatest developers in New York. One of the signs which you articulated that they show, I think that there's a combination of being having a tremendous reputation for being trustworthy and honest and transparent on one hand, and having patience on the other.
It's interesting. You and I kind of crossed on the 2nd building on that 53rd and 2nd assemblage with an owner named Armin Lelenik.
Yeah.
Was that it?
Yeah.
Who was the head maitre d' waiter at the Carlisle Hotel. So Harry Macklow and I used to go up to the Carlisle and have breakfast all the time to hang out with Armand.
Amazing.
And yeah, so Armand, well, you know this story. Armand wouldn't sell. So finally, let me back up. One of the things at the beginning of this, Harry had acquired the corner. He had the strategic piece. I don't know how he got it. I wasn't involved. But I said to him, Harry, let's try a new thing. Let's not pretend to hide your identity. Let's just be very direct and of course truthful and say and tell people it's you. And I don't think you're going to get held up. And he actually agreed to play along with me, which ended up being a stroke of luck, because when Armand wouldn't sell, we started thinking about maybe we lease his building long term with a long term option to buy, and it ended up being fantastic because the Harry Macklow, I'm afraid the minute they know it's me, I'm going to get jacked up on price, turned into the Harry Macklow who's the trusted developer who people had confidence could execute.
Sure.
Who would definitely execute the assemblage. And we were able to, work out a long-term lease with you and your client, Armand.
Yeah, so I, at the time, was a young associate at Greenberg, and there was this wonderful partner who was one of the people who helped train me, a guy named Paul Alter, who a lot of people know. And Paul was terrific, and he was very close with, I think he was very close with Armand. He's a real people person, really connected. And I sort of second chaired or assisted him as a young lawyer in that ground lease situation. And what was a very smart thing that Paul did is that in the ground lease, it was very clear, and this is an interesting concept, that for the future of that lease, oftentimes, as some people know when they're dealing with ground leases, you're going to need to go back to the ground lessor for something. Maybe you'll need a certificate, an estoppel certificate saying that, everything is in good standing and all rents have been paid and confirming the expiration date. Maybe you'll need a modification. Well, embedded in the lease was a very clear statement that any time that the ground tenant, which is really Harry Macklow, the developer, needed anything or any of his successors, not only did they have to come to Armand and give him notice, but they had to also come to his specific lawyer, and then they, being Harry Macklow, whoever owned the land at the time, would be responsible for paying for whatever it would cost, so that Armand would never be out of pocket. It would always be neutral. And I think that that's a smart thing, because a lot of times people look at a transaction as if it's a moment in time. But for a sale, right, where you're disposing of the asset and maybe there's a short tail of 6 months or a year or less of obligation, a ground lease is a
Gift that keeps on giving.
It's like a 49 to 99 year relationship. And, we have to think about that deep into the future.
Tell me about the Rob Ivanhoes, the super lawyers. What makes the super lawyer? Who are the super lawyers?
I mean, we've got some phenomenal people in this city. I'm a big fan of Rob because he trained me and gave me so much opportunity.
Yeah.
I think that Jay Neveloff is a phenomenal lawyer and counselor. I think the most important thing is to have a good relationship among lawyers, specifically transactional lawyers, so that you can pick up the phone and work out problems. So I think that some of the attributes that I've observed of some of these great lawyers that I've mentioned.
And by the way, I think great lawyer, great developer, great broker, the attributes go across.
It's
all
very
fingers.
similar. Sometimes it's not even clear. So the first and most important thing is being 100% the absolute best lawyer you could be. To absolutely know excellence. From there, you can add to it. But if you're not an absolutely smart, excellent, trained, thoughtful attorney, then you're really relying on other people, and when it's just one-on-one with either the client or opposing counsel, I think you're at a loss. So I think that one attribute is the starting thing is excellence. The next thing is to be able to engage with people and to be a great listener. The third thing is to surround yourself with other excellent attorneys, whether it be in your firm or in the sort of the environment here, particularly in New York, where you may be at a law firm that has expertise, but to know the absolute best person who's like the best tax certiorari lawyer, the most phenomenal land use person, and to be able to build a team very, very quickly, whether it's from within your own firm or externally, and to really act as the general counsel to your client. You're one-on-one with them, whether they be an institution or a family or an individual entrepreneur, you're one-on-one with them, it's you and them, and then there's the world out there. And I think that the other attribute that's quite important is to be able to understand the business of real estate. And I think some of the best lawyers are those that truly take a business-oriented approach and know how to sort of cut right through, to take everything, all of the information that's coming at you, all the problems. I mean, I could sit here, you throw a deal at me, I could tell you all the reasons it's never going to work. That's really not particularly helpful. But to really look at all the problems, and then I like to say, what is our clear path to closing? What are our goals, and what is our clear path to closing? And you wake up every day and you say, okay, these are the 19 things I'm working on. What's the clear path on each of them?
You exhibit one of the other traits of the superpower people. I'm not trying to flatter you, but it's excellence, yes, but the second word is passion, right? You love the law. You're happy at work. You exude that. People gravitate towards it, and I think that makes a huge difference. Unfortunately, as a real estate broker, we're constantly dealing with attorneys who don't love the law. They get sold a bill of goods in law school that's going to be $2,000 an hour, or that they're Ira Milstein and they're going to be on the board of General Motors, and they get full of that, and then reality hits, and they're miserable, and it translates into their work. So throughout our career, and again, this applies to developers and brokers, we really try and glom onto people who love the law, because it just comes out in your work.
I appreciate that. And when you and I have closed a lot of deals together, and each one has had its twists and turns and complications, we always have fun.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is not the idea of most people's fun, but for, I enjoy doing this stuff. And I can't tell you how many times I'm in a meeting with our clients, and even as early as recent as yesterday, and a client said to me and my two colleagues, this is going to be fun. It's going to be a great project. It's going to have lots of twists and turns. It's a puzzle. I remember I early in my career I was working on a very complicated assemblage, and it had every kind of piece every problem you could imagine. Let's say it had like 3 or 4 parcels. One parcel, the seller didn't believe in paying tax, so now I had to figure out how does he or she or the family sell the property without paying tax. The other parcel had a right of first refusal, on behalf of a garage guy. So good luck to that. That's a litigation. A third parcel had a bunch of tenants that needed to, find new homes, tenantectomy, whatever you would call it. And all of these things became part of the puzzle to put together. And it wasn't just a lawyer solving it. It's lovely to have a good, smart lawyer. But it was the lawyer working with the broker, working with the client, working with the title company and the architect. And all of these relationships come together to actually solve this problem. And the general counsel of the client at the time, I remember he turned to me, he said, this is the most complicated deal I've ever worked on in my life. And I think the last time I had this many issues was when I took the bar exam. And it was really cool. And it was a lot of fun. And it's so funny because the other day I ran into one of the bankers who was on the deal, because one of the bankers was sort of involved in one of the assets. And I hadn't seen him, I ran into him on an airplane because, if you take the shuttle back and forth to Boston enough, you're going to run into everybody. And the two of us caught up after 15 or 20 years. And he said, you know what? It's been 15 or 20 years. He's now at a huge private equity firm. He said, I still have not encountered a deal with that level of complication, yet I also haven't really seen anything that was as much fun as that. So.
Did you ever do any work for Saul Goldman?
I haven't, but I'm familiar with
Yeah.
the fact that I think he owns all the land under the New York City that's not owned by Trinity Church.
Yeah, exactly. This is a Brooklyn guy. Grew up over the family supermarket, and ended up assembling, I think it's over 700 properties. He loved fee position ground fees for the reason that you talked about, and I learned two big ones from him. So I'm 23 years old, and he's a prominent owner in my territory, which was the area that I focused on, the East 60s and 70s. He owned a lot of stuff. And I called him up one day, and I had an opportunity for him. And I said, before we talk about this, Mr. Goldman, I want to know, you always pick up the phone for me every time I call, and I'm just some young broker from, who knows where with who knows what. And he said, well, Paul, don't you know? I go, don't I know what? And he says, don't you know you never know?
That is true.
So I think take the phone call.
Always take the phone call. And I'll tell you another thing, by the way.
Or return the phone call,
Yeah.
or return the email. My son and I had a conversation. PJ's an office leasing specialist in New York, and we were talking about he's career transitioning now.
Yep.
And there are a handful of people who haven't called him back yet. No to them. Mm-hmm. And he said, can you believe people just ultimately, in some cases, don't call you back? I said, it's against everything in me.
It's not. It should be illegal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It's interesting you say that. So, listen.
That's lesson number one from Saul Goldman.
It's like an amazing thing, right? So there's we all have a lot of things pulling at us in a limited amount of time, and this is a very hard thing to do. But I have, particularly in a choppy market like we have right now, I have tried to not only to take the phone call, but a lot of these phone calls are people who are looking for a job, an opportunity, an internship for a young, a child in college who's looking to kick off their career. And I try to help. And I actually am very proud that I have, over the last 5 years, have been able to help general counsels at Company A find a home with my client or with a friend at Company B, or help friends whose kid is looking for that first break to help them find an internship. And a lot of time, it's not me actually making the direct contact. The other day I was at.
But you're maybe giving them the idea about where to go.
Well, actually, giving them some guidance and the idea of where to go, particularly for young people, but thinking about other people in my network who are like Paul Massey, right? And will take the call when I say, "Hey, we might be able to help this person. I know you know X." So, for example, it's really kind of fun. The other day, I was at a dinner party, and one of my son's best friends is trying to find a job in engineering. All right, I don't know that much about engineering. I read about it. I met engineers on the job site. By the way, I love to walk the dirt. I love to go to the job site. There's nothing better than seeing exactly where those two pieces of property line up and what the facade looks like and how the other person is sort of operating. That is a huge thing on a tangent. But I said to this young guy, I said, listen, I don't have a direct line, but let me ask a few of my clients who they use as their structural engineers. He said, that'd be awesome. And so I reached out to a dear friend of mine at a major firm here in New York, and I said, hey, do you think you can help this young man? And he said, I think I met him because you brought him with your son when we went fishing together down in Florida like a year or two ago. He's like, he's a great kid. Let me see what I could do. And the kid is now working for one of the top, this summer, he's working as an intern for one of the top engineering firms in New York City. And crawling around on parapets, is freaking out his mom and dad. He promised me he'd wear a hard hat, but he's having an amazing experience. And it's like, that's just kind of an interesting example, like take the call, but also if anyone ever asks you, can you help my friend, can you help me, can you help my child? If you can do it, do it. Or even if it's just take a moment and talk to them.
Everyone should want to help a kid too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
The second Saul Goldman lesson was delegate. So you kind of touched on it earlier with have great talented people around you. So I list a property for a woman whose father had ground leased the corner of 61st and Lex, and never wanted her to want for money. So he set the rent at $40,000 a year for 99 years. So it was fixed, but she had the security of knowing that for the rest of her life, she was going to get $40,000, which was being wildly eroded by inflation based on the value of the property. But it like perfect grist for the Saul Goldman mill, right? So I bring it to him. I think what we asked maybe $600,000 for a $40,000 income stream. So, but set for life. So he gobbled it up and said, and I just did this over the phone with him. He said, "I'll take it." And I said, "Okay, well, do you want to call your lawyer and tell him to, engage and buy this thing?" He goes, "No, you do it." And I go, he goes, "You could just call Eddie Brieger, who was one of the legends back in the day, and tell him I said we're buying this." And I don't think Goldman ever looked at it again. It just was in his portfolio, and it was done.
Amazing.
Yeah.
We actually, you and I did a deal together where I came in with one of my clients. We were sort of looking for, small assemblage opportunities. You may remember this. And I came in with the client, and we sat down with your team, and you had just had something come in the door. And it was sort of perfect. And the client said, "I'll take it." And it was as if we were buying, I don't know, flip-flops at Target. And it was, what's the worst that could possibly happen here? And you and your team grabbed onto that immediately. And you had to run a process because you were representing an estate, I think, or something like that. But what you did was very, very smart, which is that you respected the process that you had to respect. But because we have this great relationship, kept me fully informed, and then gave us the appropriate guidance that you could give. And then we ended up prevailing and owning the asset. And it ended up to be a great asset for our client.
We had touched on one, and this is a characteristic, I think. We have an acronym for our values at our company, which is EPIC: excellence, passion, integrity, and collaborative. And integrity for us doesn't mean tell the truth. It means telling the truth is an absolute given. But we're dealing with counterparties. We're dealing with third-party brokers. We're dealing with developers and buyers. And integrity to us means over-communicate, so that if you happen to have, you were on the winning side of that process, but if you happen to have not been on the winning side of the process, we would have communicated with you just as much anyway, so that you would have felt respected, transparent, and that's been something that we really value, and I think it's the sign of the great ones who can communicate like that.
I think that's right, and I think that was one of many deals that we have done together, and every time that you and I work together, it's seamless, and it's just a clear path to closing, and I love it.
Yeah. Brian, thanks for being here today, and thanks to all of you for tuning in on Block by Block.